All right, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. We specialize in educational videos, mainly on great theories of everything, ancient and modern, mostly obscure, things that you can use to um, kind of figure out everything, and especially for your paradigm shifting, your awakening to 5D consciousness, your formation of a holistic worldview, and your quest for better spiritual, mental, and physical health. Today is our 80th video we've done on the book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha from Daniel Ingram. And this book looks into all things Buddhism, but particularly the core teachings. Not so much Buddhism as a religion, but as a science, as a technique or technology that you can use in your own life, regardless of what religion, if any, that you hold. It's really mainly about meditation, particularly insight meditation, but also concentration meditation. And it provides a lot of maps and a lot of kind of gauges to help you figure out where you are and how you're doing, if you're making progress, and very pretty simple instructions to follow. And Ingram pretty much maintains that if you put in a good year doing this with several retreats thrown in, where you're doing many hours of meditation per day, you can make it at least to your first or second stage of enlightenment. The insight cycle has 16 different stages, and once you go through those first 16, then you are enlightened by a degree, and then you can go around the cycle again and get enlightened a little bit more, and so on and so forth. Now, when he talks about concentration meditation, that is meditation on an object, like your breath or a candle flame, and a meditation, insight meditation, is opening up your 5 sense doors and your mental sensations, opening up to those and investigating them for the 3 characteristics of impermanence, dissatisfactoriness, and no self. So as you begin to notice those 3 characteristics of the sensations, impressions, then you move around that cycle of insight. Okay, now we're in I think chapter 39, which is called More on the Mushroom Factor, and I still don't quite remember what the mushroom factor is, but let's see. We are just going to start here where we left off yesterday, and we'll see where this takes us. This lack of information on the ordinariness of realized individuals creates a vicious cycle in which those who are realized don't say, "I am awakened and ordinary," because if they do, then they will be viewed in very strange ways despite what they say, and because if they don't tell, only they know. Thus, the strong potential for nonsensical projections and reactions remains. While sometimes the masses are fed manure and kept in the dark, here we go with the mushroom part. The masses are fed manure and kept in the dark. If they are fed nothing at all, they will often create manure to feed themselves. No one is happy to learn that perfection in some ordinary sense is impossible. And Some will continue to seek the perfect guru, community, or even self for years, even though those do not exist. I have few qualms about blaming those who currently do know for not doing more to debunk these myths and for not being willing to speak out bravely and honestly against the mass of nonsensical magical thinking out there, though I can just as easily understand why they may not be in any mood to take the heat. As things currently stand, all the attention and confusion that can come from revealing our wisdom and understanding can often not seem to be worth it, despite how much we may want to help others. This is particularly true if we do not want to be a guru or a member of the Dharma jet set, but just want to help people learn without becoming some odd object of obsessive deification or demonization. It seems that you can only help those with very clear, strong, and noble motivations, those who are willing to listen, be intelligent and realistic about their relationship to you as a fellow human being, and with whom your personality seems to fit fairly well. Further, you can only help those who will actually practice, engage, and inquire. This turns out to be a very small group most of the time. You could also say that you can only teach those who didn't really need you to teach them in the first place, as they were going to practice anyway. It is possible, though not necessarily advisable, to drop all kinds of really glaring and even tacky hints that we have attained mastery of some aspect of the amazing states and stages of the spiritual path, and yet have no one show even the slightest sign that they have picked up on them. Even more bizarre is how few people, having been directly and unambiguously told that they are sharing the immediate airspace of someone who has attained deep levels of mastery, will ask reasonable questions about how they might do the same, which is really the whole friggin' point. Even more surprising is how few of these who do ask good questions will then use this practical information wisely. As Bill Hamilton put it, I have a treasure of infinite value that nobody wants. That's how I feel about my channel here. But just going on. He was only barely exaggerating, even regarding many of those who consider themselves meditators or Buddhists. Thus, out of practical self-preservation and a reluctant respect for the fact that most people seem not to want to hear about actual mastery, most of those who do master concentration and or insight practices tend not to talk about it, or only to a very few. All this contributes to the mushroom factor. Lastly, there seems to be a somewhat odd lack of support for potentially up-and-coming teachers. One of my friends has commented that it can be much easier to get awakened than to get lineaged or officially acknowledged that you are a qualified teacher and a responsible enough person to be allowed to teach. Have students referred to you, be a part of healthy peer review and monitoring processes that keeps teachers on the up and up, etc. Some of my very best, most dedicated and accessible teachers were not officially authorized by their teachers to teach, despite their high attainments, great teaching ability, and extensive knowledge of spiritual practice. Also, there seems to be barely any clear articulation of roles that occupy the middle ground, a poorly developed sense of apprenticeship, little sense of intermediate territory between a student and a fully engaged or authorized teacher. The extent of these issues varies by tradition. It is true that there are good reasons that the senior teaching establishments are slow or reluctant to allow new teachers into the carefully guarded inner circles and positions of authority. There are certain individuals who possess the mastery needed to be a teacher, but are not good choices for other reasons, with mental pathology, limited social or communication skills, lack of maturity, and off-putting personality traits being chief among them. There are those whose political skills are such that they have managed to get endorsed even though they were not qualified to teach at the level they claimed they could, with the associated problems all the way to serious allegations and devastations predictably following. However, current senior teachers, many of whom are the first generation of Westerners to do so, do not yet seem to be quite as comfortable endorsing new teachers as their Asian teachers tended to be endorsing them. Perhaps this will correct itself in given time, as there is a lot of unused talent out there and a lot of unmet demand for authentic teachers. On the other hand, making a living as a teacher can be hard, and who needs more competition for scarce donations or seats on the front platform at overbooked meditation centers? It is also true that numerous meditation traditions that have come to the West have many people teaching in them without the foggiest idea that they are not at all qualified to do so. The canonical and commentarial texts state that we should have at least crossed the arising and passing away event to teach, though that's stage 4 of the insight cycle. Though in the primary tradition I come from, they consider second path as the standard minimum requirement for any sort of teaching. Basically, chancing into a path is impressive, but being able to lag another one demonstrates reproducible competence. I again blame the mushroom factor for this lack of reasonable knowledge about possible teaching criteria. I suspect that if people knew what some of the minimum standards are for qualified teachers, and that there are those who meet these, many people would realize that they simply shouldn't be teaching except at very introductory levels and bow out gracefully. Educating unknowing seekers about reasonable criteria for teaching might also prevent unqualified, unawakened teachers from being able to gain authority and credibility, neither of which they've earned. Beyond this, there are also good reasons to question the very concepts of teacher and student, and the disturbing and often unquestioned rigidity with which they are sometimes applied. One person may have an understanding that they share with someone else, and then turn around and ask the same person a question about something that the person who was the student just moments before is skilled in. I have concluded that some of the best teaching and learning happens in conversations between friends, and not necessarily as much in the context of very short, formal interviews with lineage teachers who have just flown in for the week. While the internet is facilitating more of these sorts of useful conversations, it is also creating a quagmire of low quality, low level, low yield, low accuracy, low value Dharma interactions, as is the internet's nature. And plenty of websites are still basically hostile to what I would consider real, practical, high-end meditation theory and practice. This is slowly changing, and today there are a number of good sites and communities dedicated to open, kind, respectful, encouraging, ethical, and fruitful discussions of strong practice. The climate of secrecy surrounding conversations about Dharma mastery, restrictive lineage issues, and the rarity of engaging in comprehensive, deep conversations with harried and overextended jet-set Dharma teachers combine to produce a demand for what I term the Dharma underground. This refers to loose associations of those who are in the know but not officially endorsed, who cautiously seek one another out, support one another, and exchange ideas about how to go deeper in ways that have everything to do with friendship and empowerment, and little to do with formal or unyielding affiliations, lineages, or dogmatic and or disempowering concepts around teacher and student. Often plenty of Dharma conversations occur in silent retreat centers or in other ways that involve breaking some of the rules that may be helpful from one perspective, but also defend the semi-arbitrary privileges of the lineaged elite while disempowering and marginalizing others with valuable and accurate knowledge and experience to share. Interestingly, when reading the old texts, I often get the feeling that a significantly more egalitarian, balanced, and friendly style was the norm in the early Buddhist community, and I often long for its return. It is interesting that, unlike tantric traditions and many others, the Theravada does not have any formal vows of secrecy regarding the details of mastery of its practices. Perhaps they would just be overkill. The introduction to the Jataka, or birth stories of the Buddha, which incidentally forms the basis for much of the Bodhisattva ideal that developed in the Mahayana, says that the Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree in powerful, one-pointed meditation, resisted the 10 armies of Maya, perceived the truth of our experience, and attained full and unsurpassed awakening. For those of you not familiar with standard Buddhist icons, Maya is the personification of the temptation of the world, the lord of all that is impermanent, simultaneously a satanic and trickster figure who does his very best to thwart those who would escape from his dominion, attaining realization and go beyond birth and death. During the heroic struggle of the Buddha on that day, he transforms and overcomes a great number of assaults by Maya and his armies through his steadiness in the 10 perfections, or paramis. The 10 perfections of the Pali Canon can be translated in several ways, and I list them as generosity, morality, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, resolute determination, loving kindness, and equanimity. These assaults by the armies of Maya in the story are relatively fantastic and, while quite a mythologized and anthropomorphized bit of work, make for fun reading. They consist of a whirlwind, a great rainstorm, showers of flaming rocks, weapons and hot ashes, sand, mud, profound darkness, and a great discus hurled from a huge elephant. The Buddha was steady in his contemplation, deeply rooted in the 10 perfections, having purified his karma and mind during countless previous lives. Through the power of his actions and abilities, these assaults were transformed into flowers, celestial ointment, and the like. Later, the 10 armies of Maya came to be listed as 1. Sensual pleasures, 2. Discontent, 3. Hunger and thirst, 4. Craving, 5. Sloth and torpor, 6. Fear, 7. Doubt, 8. Conceit and ingratitude, 9. Gain, renown, honor, and undeserved fame, and 10. Self-exaltation and disparaging others. These are now useful guidelines for difficulties that must be avoided when possible and seen as they are for meditators to progress on the path of wisdom. They tend to occur in roughly that order, cycling as does everything else. No 11th army is listed. However, Sutra 26 of the Middle Length Discourses says that soon after his enlightenment, it occurred to the Buddha that there was no one else who could understand what he had understood. He thought to himself, that this Dharma was too profound, too subtle, too against the worldly tide, too difficult. Teaching it would only cause him trouble, as his potential audience would be a generation obsessed with lust and hate, mired in worldliness, incapable of understanding the Dharma, and so the Buddha decided to keep quiet. There are other texts that say that it was Maya who came to the Buddha and said to him, "All right, you win. You have gone beyond birth, death, and my realm. Who will understand what you have to teach? Who else can do this? Who will believe you? Nobody." The Buddha, as we have said, agreed without qualification. This I called the 11th army of Maya. Maya's last temptation, the temptation to keep quiet. The 11th army of Maya consists of the vast and profound difficulties realizers face in describing, explaining, and promoting real liberating insights. The story continues in the typical style. The great Brahma Sahampati, a relatively high god, understood through his clairvoyant powers that the Buddha had attained full awakening, but had chosen to remain silent and inactive. This was surprising, considering that the Buddha had vowed to attain that which was beyond birth and death, in order to liberate all beings. The Brahma Sahampati appeared to the Buddha and begged him to teach the Dharma so that those with but little dust in their eyes might see. The story goes that he asked the Buddha to look at the world and see that there were in fact a few who would understand what he had to teach. The Buddha then used his clairvoyance to survey the world, and indeed he saw that he had been wrong, that there were a few whose faculties were keen, whose vision was only slightly obscured, who would understand. So he wandered off in search of them, and he found some of them. He taught them, they understood, and those teachings have been passed down in an unbroken lineage of practitioners for over 2,500 years. While the ancient and modern commentators go to great lengths to rationalize why this was all part of the plan, that the Buddha just pretended to or manifested not to want to teach for various reasons, I take a different, perhaps more cautious and probably realistic view. If we look at what happened as the Buddha tried to go and teach the Dharma, we must admit that it was a long, difficult road. He had serious family dysfunction, logistical problems, encounters with bandits, and many conflicts with opposing sects, as well as within his own order. People tried to kill him. His own order fractured at points because of extremist sects and views. People made power plays to take over the order, and so on. At one point, he got so frustrated with his monks that he left them on their own for the whole 3-month rains retreat and withdrew into the forest by himself. Due to the continued bad and foolish behavior of his monks and nuns in the last 25 years of his teaching, he laid down the kind of restrictive rules usually reserved for the dictatorships run by raving lunatics. Clearly, he did so reluctantly, as there were no such rules for the final 20 years of the order of the Sangha. The point here is that even for the Buddha, whose teaching ability was clearly of the rarest variety and who had an unequaled knack for helpful and precise conceptual frameworks, there was nothing easy about spreading the Dharma. However mythologized we feel the Buddha was, clearly he was a completely astounding person. He met his struggles with spectacular reserves of intellect, wisdom, stamina, poise, grace, kindness, and determination. Few of us are so blessed, but yet the difficulties we face are largely the same as those faced by the Buddha. I will now begin a short list of basic difficulties faced in trying to spread the Dharma by those who know it for themselves. I list them in no particular order. The downside is that I have no great solutions to these problems, but as the AA folks say, admitting you have a problem is the first step. One of the most profound difficulties in supporting liberating insights is the difficulty of working with language to discuss them. Words simply cannot easily explain realizations to those viewing the world through the filter of duality, though they can explain techniques that make insights much more likely. Real insight goes beyond the conceptual frameworks of the dualistic mind. Anything you say about it is only partly true at best. The smarter the practitioner, the more frustrating they may find the apparent contradictions in Dharma language and teachings. The approximately 50% of adults who do not even have the capacity for formal abstract thinking will likely consider you very crazy, intimidating, or at best, someone to be avoided. On a related note, if you are awakened, then what is so glaringly obvious to you simply isn't to everybody else. And the longer you have seen it, the stranger it becomes that everyone doesn't see it also. It can become harder and harder to remember what it was like to sit down on a cushion and not even be able to attain the first jhana, much less cycle effortlessly from the 4th to 16th jhanas, or jnanas, For those who have attained arhatship, the luminosity and centerlessness of perspective becomes such a natural part of perception that it seems incredible that it was ever otherwise. On the flip side of the same coin, we may remember the profound struggles, the thousands of hours of back and knee pain, the extreme subtlety of perception needed, the endless stretching of our perceptual thresholds, and the relentless determination of tolerance for pain and our own embarrassing humanity that was required to see it. We may remember the spent vacation time, financial difficulties, relationship issues, logistical complexities, and difficulties with teachers and fellow meditators that are often necessary to endure for long retreats and extended daily practice. We may marvel that we were able to do it at all, much less imagine anyone else giving up so much to do it. Are we really going to go around shaking people out of their cozy little lives for this path? That brings me to the question of audience. At any given time and place, there are only a handful at best who are ready to hear deep Dharma and then convert that knowledge into liberating practice. This was true in the time of the Buddha and continues to be true today. Even among monks and nuns, you will not find many who are awakened or even aspire to be so in this lifetime except in the most unusual practice, monasteries, and that are explicitly dedicated to actual mastery. The best chances of successfully sharing the Dharma are generally with those who have already crossed the arising and passing away, though the complexities of the dark night can give them such a complex love-hate relationship to practice and Dharma that you may not be able to reach them at all, or perhaps not until they have marinated in the dark night's juices for some years. You also may never reach them as they may not resonate with your personality, teaching style, or your own conceptual and linguistic baggage. You may not even be able to find them, although if you hang a shingle of some sort, you will likely cross paths with at least a couple. Okay, let's read a few more paragraphs here. Meditation groups are flourishing in many parts of the world, yet very few of these people will take the time to get serious about meditation. In truth, few are interested in full awakening at all. Most of these groups function essentially as venues for social support with a unifying dogma and nice moral lessons, inspiring readings, sharing time, comfortable and satisfying rituals, a little meditation, and often overt or subtle worship and deification of some popular figurehead purported to have done it. Very few will aspire to real mastery themselves. Very few will take the time to learn even the basics of meditation theory. Even fewer will go on retreats. Of those that do, only a handful will get their concentration strong enough to attain to basic jhanas or gnanas. Of these, only a couple will be able to cross the arising and passing, handle and investigate the dark night, stages 5 through 10, attain equanimity, stage 11, and get stream entry. Of those who attain stream entry, a reasonable number will progress to the middle pass, but not many will attain arhatship. Call me cynical, but this was true in the Buddhist time, and it remains true today. You might think that you could approach these groups and say, hey, I know how it's done. Why read the dead books of some guy far away with whom you are unlikely to have any real contact when there is someone right here who can help you understand it for yourself? Sure, you might have to bust your butt, but this is what you are all shooting for, isn't it? Unfortunately, likely reactions include complete disbelief, profound skepticism, confusion, alienation, intimidation, jealousy, anger, territoriality, competitiveness, vitriol, dismissal, and the lingering doubts created by having to face the fact that actual attainment is not what most are into at all. People hate feeling these things and are more likely to blow you off than deal with the feelings aroused by being faced with people who have not given up on themselves or the practice. The chances of a group or even an individual saying, great, I've been looking for a real friend in the Dharma for years, and now there is one right here. Please do tell me how it's done, and I'll go do it, are essentially next to nothing. That said, miracles do occur, and occasionally we do run into the few who have but little dust in their eyes. Okay, I think we're going to stop there, even though let's see, we have only 10 seconds to go. So yeah, we'll finish this chapter early tomorrow and start up with a new one. Thanks for tuning in today.